And joining us now to talk more about our trip to Brazil and Brazilian agriculture is Dr. Roberto Barbosa. He is an assistant professor at the LSU Ag Center, and Dr. Barbosa has been a little bit of our translator and a little bit of our tour guide while we're on this this trip. And Dr. Barbosa, welcome to This Week in Louisiana Agriculture.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's talk about some issues with regard to Brazilian agriculture. You know, Americans have had agricultural production since the first settler set foot here, but that's not always been the case in Brazil. We heard a presentation in which, at the beginning of the 20th century, Brazil tried to balance its industrial development on the backs of agriculture. And in a lot of cases, farmers were taxed heavily. And it was difficult to be a farmer at the turn of the 20th century here in Brazil.
It was. It's a fact, and it was really a problem. It's starting in on the 20s in the last century, where they wanted a national movement and trying to come up with urban centers and heavily industrialized society on the back of the Brazilian farmer. So a movement was created where transfer of not only the funds but all the workforce, trying to capture all those resources from agriculture and bring them to the urban centers to work on the factories.
And it took Brazil almost, as I understood it, into the mid to late 1980s before that cycle was finally broken. And I guess, you know, all the agriculture we've seen on our program here from Brazil seems like agriculture has been productive and profitable for hundreds of years. But what finally made that change? What finally broke free in which the urban and the government said, you know what, we really need these farmers?
I think in the 70s, I think that oil price shock that we have internationally was a primary factor of that breaking that cycle, where the politicians and the society understood that we have to have a very strong agriculture if we want to survive. And I think the ethanol program had a major impact on that. So they realized that we really need a strong agricultural sector if we want to make it.
Very good. Well, Dr. Barbosa, I know all of us on this trip appreciate your guidance and your input during our 2 weeks here in Brazil.
Sure, I'm just glad to be here.
Thanks very much.
Service.
Very good. Dr. Roberto Barbosa with the LSU Ag Center.